Make sure you leave a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel to see more of my reviews and watch some of my older reviews. What's going on, y'all? Welcome to another movie review. This time I'll be reviewing Crime 101, starring Chris Hemsworth, Mark Ruffalo, and Halle Berry, along with a few others. But it's essentially a crime drama centered around a thief, kind of a high-value thief with Chris Hemsworth. He begins the movie with a jewelry heist, but he's after these different high-value targets. He kind of cuts them off en route when they're being shipped. And he has a kind of middleman that kind of sets him up, and he kind of gets away with the goods. Mark Ruffalo plays a detective that's kind of on the trail of this pattern. This isn't the first time that Chris Hemsworth's character has struck, so he's kind of on to the pattern. And then Halle Berry plays an insurance adjuster who's dealing with high-value clients, one of which is having this big, giant, really extravagant wedding where there's going to be a lot of high-value jewelry involved, and this leads to a job that Chris Hemsworth is involved in. So, but with no further ado, let's get into my review of Crime 101. So story-wise, I felt like this movie felt very familiar, almost too familiar. When I left the theater, my first thought was like, it kind of reminded me of Heat with Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, but just not as good as that. It's definitely like a thriller, drama, got some action, got some cool chases in it and everything. But Chris Hemsworth is a jewelry thief. We get a cold open with him, cutting off a jewelry shipment, and then we kind of see how he works. He has this kind of code of ethics. He doesn't really shoot or hurt people if he doesn't need to. He gives them back their stuff, their phones, whatever, when he's done. Mark Ruffalo plays a detective who's kind of almost inexplicably on the beat of Chris Hemsworth's character. He kind of has like the scent. He's picked up on the scent of it being like a serial burglar or whatever, but or serial thief going down to 101. I think he calls them like the 101 something. He gives them like a nickname or whatever, but the 101 thief or something like that. But it's that kind of cliche detective character where it's like the whole police department is kind of like, this is just a one-off. This is just one person acting, on their own, these individual incidents. And he's like, no, I think there's more to this. He's one of those guys that is kind of, he can feel it in his bones type of guy. Which is kind of cliche. And I think that it reads that way a little bit. I do think Mark Ruffalo does a good job in that role, but I think that is somewhat of a trope in like the crime, drama, thriller, zone. So, but Halle Berry plays an insurance adjuster who deals with these high value clients for a firm, and she's kind of being looked over for a promotion, and she's getting older, but so we essentially deal with Chris Hemsworth wanting to do maybe like one more job, kind of get what they call walk away money, and kind of get out of the business. He's getting kind of spooked by what's going on, so he wants out. He has a kind of a middleman that sets him up with the jobs. It's played by Nick Nolte, and he's telling him like, I think I'm gonna do this one or whatever, and I don't know if I'm gonna do it again, whatever. So yeah, and that's our story. He ends up doing this one more job, kind of stalking Halle Berry's character, seeing that she's involved with these high value clients with these assets that he could probably take off of them and then be able to sell, make a lot of money, make more money than he's made on any other job. And that is essentially the movie. So we got the detective. So we got the detective closing in on the thief, and the thief wanting to do one more job, that's a pretty, run of the mill type of scenario for this type of movie. Not that that's a bad thing altogether. I think in this movie though, it reads like a little bit of a regurgitation of all those tropes put together. Acting wise, I think everybody did a good job. I don't think there was much of a standout performance in the movie. I think, Halle Berry, Mark Ruffalo, Chris Hemsworth, they all do the job. They play the characters in a believable enough way. I just don't think that there's like a standout performance, but I think other than that, the acting is good. It doesn't take you out of the movie at any point in the performances. I think everybody is nobody's mailing it in, so I think it was good. Pacing wise, I do think this movie kind of dragged on a little bit. I think it's a little bit of a slow burn. especially when I think about certain scenes. There's a scene in there where Chris Hemsworth hires an escort, and once she undresses, they just kind of abruptly cut to him on the elevator. And this scene probably takes up a few minutes at least, but nothing came of it. It doesn't really come into play later on. I guess it only serves to just show him as being like a lone wolf without really much like human connection or something like that. But other than that, it just didn't seem like it made any sense to even be there. It kind of felt like a deleted scene from like a DVD bonus footage or bonus feature. So yeah, I do think it dragged on a little bit. I think it's a little over 2 hours, like it's around 2:19 or something like that. And I think it could have been shorter and still have told the same story, and not felt like the characters were underdeveloped or the story didn't tie up loose ends. I think it could have been a lot shorter, but yeah. So the pacing was okay. I think it could have been a little bit shorter. Cinematography wise, I think that, and I am cutting out message because I don't know if this is like the messages. I'm counting it now as like a bonus category, but cinematography wise, I do think they had a couple cool sequences, mainly vehicle chase sequences going through LA with the Chrysler, whatever that is. Those were pretty cool scenes. The motorcycle chase, that was pretty cool. And they even do some cool like camera work where the cameras are affixed to like the car door or something, and they slam the door and the camera kind of is clearly attached and it goes along with the swing of the door and everything, and frames up like Halle Berry or whoever else is in the car when they do that. I've seen that like in Snowfall and other stuff like that. But this is kind of cool, like kind of a creative, almost like behind the scenes, without being behind the scenes way of showing, some depicting camera work in like a car or something like that. So it kind of gives it almost like an action cam type of feel, which is kind of cool, especially when you're doing like action scenes, a lot of speed and all that. It's a cool like creative flair to how you decide to shoot action like that, especially when it comes to vehicles. But other than that, I think cinematically it looked fine. The movie looked good. Nothing out of the ordinary. All the shots look good. Is not too much creative flair. It's pretty straightforward. As far as the ending, I was a little confused at first and I am going to spoil the ending. So, but I was kind of confused on how Mark Ruffalo's character was able to switch out the diamonds or whatever, and then why he gave them to Halle Berry's character, and seemingly all of them to Halle Berry's character. I know she helped him. She tipped him off to what was going on with Mike and everything when she got spooked or whatever. But it seemed like maybe he would have, I don't know, gave some to Chris Hemsworth's character or something. But that the Barry Cohen's character, he was kind of annoying. I think he was kind of written to be annoying. But just the idea of a thief that's tailing people on a motorcycle, in a very like recognizable and kind of conspicuous vehicle. I just felt like that kind of seemed kind of weird. Like he just needed to have a thing, and that was the motorcycle thing. Yeah. So at first I was confused, but then I remember there was a scene where Mark Ruffalo goes into the evidence locker and goes back into that the bin that's associated with that first heist that we get in the movie. So I guess that might have been the moment that he went and got the other jewels and was able to switch it out. And then basically in the end, there being like a little bit of like, the detective knowing that Chris Hemsworth or Mike or James Davis, I think it was his real name, has like a code of ethics. He doesn't hurt people. He kind of does things in a very like specific way. And it's a little bit, if you're going to be a thief, it's a little bit more of an ethical way of being one. So I think he respected that. Even Mark Ruffalo's character seems like he was like kind of like he was like always trying to do the good thing. They had the scene where they pulled up on the heist or whatever, the guy with the gun and the jewels. Oh, it was a heist, yeah. But and the other officers were already there. And then the one guy tries to like, after shooting him, the one guy tries to say that he had a gun or whatever. And I think he did, but he didn't have it drawn. But the police officer shot him even without him having his gun drawn, and then says that he had drawn his gun first. And then Mark Ruffalo kind of like pushing back on that. So he's kind of like, even amongst his colleagues, he's like the truth teller or whatever, even if it means being kind of like a pariah to his department. So, and even Halle Berry's character, when Chris Hemsworth, gave her the proposal of doing this job with one of her clients, like, taking some of the stuff from his, some of this shipment that he had coming in, she was kind of appalled and kind of like disgusted at the like lifestyle that Chris Hemsworth was living as this like jewelry thief. So everybody kind of had this like moral compass or whatever. But in the end, Mark Ruffalo's character's moral compass leading him to like, hey, here's our shooter. Chris Hemsworth ends up taking out Barry Cohen's character. And he, is essentially saying, I'll tell them a different story than what actually happened, and you just get out of here. So I thought the end was okay. And then once Chris Hemsworth was about to turns around the car, I thought for a second we were gonna get like a actual Heat ending, where it's like I could have got away, but I just had to go back for one more thing, and then we get like one more like standoff or something like that. But it turns out that it was just because of his girlfriend, which the girlfriend whole thing, I thought that there was going to be something with that by the end. Like she was going to turn out to be somebody more than what she was putting on to be, especially because of how they met in this, like, her rear-ending him and then kind of blaming it on him stopping all of a sudden when he's like, no, I didn't. So I thought that was just like her way of getting into his life, and trying to befriend him for some other kind of reason. But it turns out that they were just regular people and she was just a bad driver. So yeah, I mean, the ending was okay. I thought it was like a little sappy with the like diamonds and him giving them, Chris Hemsworth giving Mark Ruffalo's character the Mustang or whatever. But I mean, if you were a thief and a cop had you dead to rights and let you go, I think, you probably would be appreciative, but it's not as satisfying, I guess, of an ending as I might have hoped, or especially with this seeming like it was going the route of like a Heat thing, especially when he turned around. But it was fine. It wasn't bad. I think it just I would have probably been more satisfied with a more action-packed ending, I think. But it kind of had like a little bit of a happy ending. So all that being said, rewatchability, I really don't think I would go back and watch this. Even like on streaming, I think it was fine. I think it was a good watch. A little slow, but I just think, I've seen it. I understand it. There's no real twist or anything like that. It's just like a somewhat of a popcorn flick. I've seen it once. I definitely wouldn't go back to the theater to see it again. And I'm not really pressed to turn it on streaming when it comes out. So, but, so I can't completely recommend it, I guess. But overall, it was a decent movie. It wasn't nothing out of the ordinary or overly noteworthy, but it was a decent movie. So for my review or my score for Crime 101 starring Chris Hemsworth, I am going to give Crime 101 6.5 reels out of 10. I wanted to go 7, but it honestly was just like an okay movie. I kind of felt like, it was all right. All of the things that it kind of seems like, or it like seems akin to, I feel like are just better. Like Heat is just a little bit better of that type of movie, among others. But yeah, it was just like an okay movie. But if you enjoyed this review, make sure you leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what movies you would like me to review. Speaking of, I'm about to get ready to go and watch Tyler Perry's new movie, Joe's College Road Trip or whatever. So be looking for a review for that, because I'm sure it's going to be something to talk about. But with that, my name is Deron Shields. Thank you for watching my review. I'm out.